In honor of Sony's absolutely genius decision to end physical discs, today's video is going to be played completely digitally. There are many games taking place in the Gundam universe, unsurprisingly so, as the series is more lasting in story than even Dragon Ball Z. You know, despite it being just a tad less popular with 13-year-olds these days, but it is nonetheless enduring, even when its ideas are sometimes too ambitious for its general audience or result in downright polarizing reworks of the entire series universe that may or may not have reached completion at all before being finished. It's an IP that reaches into just about every medium, including manga, novels, card games, and the absolutely legendary model kits that have inspired both idol groups and worldwide tournaments. So you can expect that, being the experimental juggernaut that Mobile Suit Gundam actually is, there are some extremely experimental games attached to the IP. In fact, the Gundam franchise has touched everything from simplistic action games, tactical shooters, and RPGs, all the way to card and gacha mobile games, which, of course, it's a Japanese IP. And sure, they aren't all good or memorable, oftentimes just existing for the sake of fan service. But the ones that stick out are often spoken of in the comments section of YouTube videos for years to come. I should know, I've heard of Zeonic Front for years now and just haven't gotten around to it. Though is Zeonic Front really SOCOM with Zakus like I've been told so many times? Well, I guess hang on to your master grade RX-78s, you're about to find out. As with way too many games based on the OG Mobile Suit Gundam timeline, Zeonic Front takes place during the One-Year War, more specifically the first season of the television series. Its biggest claim to fame is that it's a rather involved take on the Principality of Zeon's side. Not only are you playing as Zaku's in its missions, but you're actively experiencing the determination, passion, and even the desperation of those fighting under its banner. It isn't exactly an expertly written drama that's going to suck you in with its storytelling and depth, but there is a genuine consideration for the original source material that just can't be denied.
That's fast. Our forces have seized this block. I advise you to surrender. I understand.
The art and even the voice acting complement the first season to a T, with the latter seemingly intentionally miming the tone and cliptastic quality of the original's dubs. Well, at least I hope it's intentional, otherwise that dips the game's voice acting into a more negative light.
Our surprise attack through the passage has been successful. We've captured the Federation Force's submarine, and we've also managed to secure the dock.
The game's developers, BEC, also made sure to keep all the moral ambiguity the series is known for afloat. Admittedly though, I have experienced so much surrounding the One-Year War that I'm genuinely numb to any sort of excitement or wonder that would have come from the setting, so I wasn't really hooked by that aspect. But for those unfamiliar, the One-Year War, which is part of the original Universal Century timeline of Mobile Suit Gundam, was a devastating conflict between the Earth Federation and the Principality of Zeon that lasted about a year, hence why it was called the One-Year War. Sparked by Zeon's declaration of independence from Earth and its push for autonomy for space colonies. Zeon initially gained a major advantage by introducing mobile suits, mainly the Zaku, which outclassed the Federation's early defenses and allowed them to dominate much of space and even launch attacks on Earth itself, causing massive civilian casualties and destruction. Over time, however, the Earth Federation rapidly developed its own mobile suits, most famously the Gundam, though it wasn't the first, and began turning the tide through superior resources and production capacity. The war became defined not just by large-scale battles, but the moral and human cost on both sides, as soldiers and civilians were drawn into escalating cycles of retaliation. It ultimately ended with Zeon's defeat, but left a lasting legacy of political instability, trauma, and continued conflict throughout the Universal Century. It was also responsible for the greatest animated movie of all time, Char's Counterattack, or maybe it's just my favorite, or both. What really drew me in though about the narrative was the interactions you have with your teammates between missions, which are all completely voiced and probably add the most to this game story-wise. Gundam has always been extremely heavy on its character building and how the situations and environments thrust onto the universe's denizens by the advent of spacefaring colonies, mobile suits, and the massive political power moves that come with it affect them. So this being the strongest narrative piece here makes complete sense. Sadly though, if you were to skip all the dialogue in the game, pass through all the interactions in the advice section before missions, you come to the stark realization that so much of this game really is just its briefings and interactions, which sort of pushes Zeonic Front into visual novel territory a bit more than I would like. Not to say the genre is bad or anything, but not exactly what I expected here. But as I've said, I've heard this game rather often called SOCOM with Zakus, and while it certainly looks that way, I bring you the news that it is, in fact, not that at all. Zeonic Front is a tactical game that requires a bit of planning through establishing attack routes and picking effective loadouts for your attack teams. And I had wholly expected to say more about this, but in actuality, the majority of this game is pretty much automatic. It's a game where the developers, BEC, were very much in tune with the PS2 and its controller's limitations, so they tried their absolute best to pack in as much functionality as possible, but also make it far easier to manage everything too. This leaves the player with a lot of strategic options that they don't ever really have to use, as just walking around the map shooting enemies and avoiding fire oftentimes allows your highly intelligent AI companions to do all the work for you. And I'm not being sarcastic either. For me, several missions were completed by my AI teammates before I could even go to where I was supposed to go. Because I was playing carefully. But they were computers who already knew the game and could function without being confused by the controller layout and vaguely explained mechanics. Speaking of which, the game throws so much at you at once, but only trickles out tutorials between certain missions. Important ones that you'd actually need to know, such as stealth and why you need to use 3 radar types, leaving you extremely overwhelmed when nothing really works the way you'd think. And no, this game really isn't a third-person shooter you can get through with skillful shooting. All aiming is done automatically within range, otherwise you can't shoot at all. The distance away from a target and whether you press the fire button once or hold it down determines what sort of attack you do, including melee. That's okay though, as you can literally put this game in semi-automatic mode at any time, which pretty much means you don't have to do much at all. So knowing that, you can gather that my reaction to this title was a little underwhelming. But if you're looking for me to summarize my opinion on the gameplay, the biggest brain response I can think of is ambitious but flawed due to limitations. It's not overly easy or anything because Zakus can be wiped off the map in seconds. Yet the majority of the game is generally a cakewalk for the average player because there are systems in place that basically allow you to bypass most of its mechanics. I of course never use semi-automatic mode here, trying to wring out a bit of challenge during my playthrough. But aside from unit management, the actual combat is boiled down to walking forward and a single button press or hold. The strategy really just comes down to going fast or slow so you aren't seen and can fire at an enemy's backside for an instant kill. That is if your teammates don't do it all for you and complete the mission on your behalf. So all the wonder sort of fades out when you start to realize this game's only hard at first because it barely shows you how to play it. Once you understand it, it becomes an afternoon at best, especially if you skip all the briefings and interactions with teammates. There's still a lot to like here though. I'm not saying the game is bad, it just doesn't live up to its potential, nor does it really succeed at the core concept of being a team tactical shooter. It's a team tactical game. But if you're a big fan of the original UC timeline style and art, like I am, then you're in for a treat here because Zeonic Front is completely rooted in that. All of the character profiles are either direct versions of existing characters from the original series, or new ones designed to match the same aesthetic. Thankfully, the original characters don't look out of place or off at all, it all feels very in line. But the real draw visually is the in-game graphics themselves, which certainly aren't the best the PS could do, but for 2001, and compared to a lot of games released before and around the same time, it's pretty solid. It's just not Metal Gear Solid 2. There's something about the more simple graphics and limited lighting that meshes really well with Zaku designs, giving Zeonic Front a rougher, more grounded look that it seems to be going for. Maps are huge, though they're repeated constantly, and it's surprising to see a PS2 game manage so many models without collapsing under itself. Then again, I'm playing this digitally as our corporate overlords at Sony intended, so physical system disc performance could be something else entirely. Thankfully, Sony helped me avoid that with this one. Anyhow, I've been Kei-Nova. Sorry for the long wait between videos. Life has its fun surprises. Like and subscribe if you want to see more videos more frequently, and I'll see you in the next one.